Andrew, what was it like, Trudeau finally answering in a form of question period?
Well, it was funny. There was not a huge amount of fireworks. I think a lot of people were expecting that it was going to be this case where we'd all tune into question period, the fur would be flying. It started out by all accounts very civil, actually. Andrew Scheer asked the Prime Minister for an update on the Nova Scotia shooting, and then some questions about really the meat of the government's response when it comes to getting ventilators in, preparedness, the emergency stockpile that we know was expired and discarded. But I do think there's a symbolic issue here that needs to be pointed out, which is that Justin Trudeau was claiming for the last few days that Andrew Scheer's desire to have Parliament reconvene, as all parties had originally scheduled, by the way, was going to jeopardize the health of 338 MPs. The Liberal talking point, the media talking point was that Scheer was basically pushing for all the MPs to fly from far-flung corners of the country, from Vancouver Island, from Nunavut, from Yukon, from Nova Scotia to Ottawa, and pack themselves into the House of Commons like sardines, when in actuality, all that was at stake was exactly what we saw today, which is a pared down, bare bones, proportionate number of MPs from each party getting together under the same roof and doing the business of government. You know, for all that we talk about the importance of government in the response to COVID-19, you can't have government without Parliament unless you surrender what is the core identity of our government, which is a parliamentary democracy.
Yeah. Well, recall that about a month or so ago, Trudeau wanted to change the rules so that he could rule by fiat, including any spending, not just till we're through the pandemic, but through to the end of 2021. Now that was such an overreach, even the media balked. But Trudeau has taken every opportunity to empower himself, take authorities away from Parliament, and reduce scrutiny of his own conduct.
Yeah, and I think it's exactly because of that that the parliamentary oversight that Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives have been pushing for is so important, because we've already seen really what the ideal scenario is for the Liberals, which is an executive fiat that allows them to tax and spend far beyond the imminent danger of the pandemic. And I think that whole episode with that bait and switch from the Liberals on that initial relief bill shows why people are more leery. And there was one clip from Andrew Scheer's press conference on this morning, as a matter of fact, where a CBC journalist asked him, her words, "What's your problem?" She literally said, "Why don't you just go along with all of these other parties? What's your problem?" And that was, I guess, in some ways we can laud the honesty of CBC, just saying Andrew Scheer and the Conservatives need to go along and fall in line with the other parties. But the whole point is you need to have that oversight that comes from an opposition party. You need to have the oversight that comes from the parliamentary process.
Yeah. You know, I saw that clip. I think it was Julie Van Dusen. We have it now. Let me play that for our viewers. Just absolutely unthinkable that if the shoe was on the other foot, if Stephen Harper were the Prime Minister saying he didn't want to be accountable, imagine the CBC saying to some Liberal, why don't you just go along? I mean, come on. Here, take a look at Julie Van Dusen of the CBC state broadcaster.
You seem to be almost suggesting that the other parties are joining forces with the government. You've called one of them a cheerleader, almost like they're plotting something. I'm just trying to figure out why just won't you go along with everyone else? Like, what's your problem? What have you got to lose?
Well, you know, we don't believe that going along with a plan that eliminates 80% of the sitting days of the House of Commons during a crisis is serves Canadians. We don't believe that will result in better programs and services for Canadians. In fact, we know the contrary to be true. And we're not talking about some theoretical concept. We're not talking about a hypothetical. We know it to be true. When the government has proposed programs...
You know, it's almost like they're holding the opposition to account. Why you guys have to oppose everything? Sure, you're called the leader of the opposition, but you have to be so opposy about it. I thought that was a deeply embarrassing moment for Julie Van Dusen personally, for the CBC in general, but the media party, they've really been that way since this pandemic began.
Yeah, that's been the role. And to be fair, I think in the early days, everyone was committed to that idea of what Justin Trudeau has called the Team Canada approach, which is all hands on deck, suspend partisan differences. And I think that if the government had kept up with that on its end of the equation, that might be possible. But they've revealed that they've tried to seize power on this. They've revealed that a lot of the promises they've made for relief aren't making their way to where they're supposed to. And more importantly, I think they've completely compromised their credibility by giving public health advice and recommendations that are wrong, that are just flat out wrong, that are reversed within days, reversed within a week, reversed within a few weeks. I mean, you compound that with the government shilling for the Chinese regime's numbers, with all of the other factors of the World Health Organization, and you've had, I think, a huge crisis of credibility in the people that are supposed to be above partisanship leading us all through this.
That's an excerpt from my daily show, the Ezra Levant Show. Every day I do a monologue on the news of the day, then I interview an interesting guest, and then I read my hate mail. You gotta subscribe. Go to rebelnews.com.